With us now is Yoni Appelbaum, the author of the hit new book, Stuck: How the Privileged and the Property Broke the Engine of American Opportunity. He's a cultural historian and deputy executive editor at The Atlantic. We are also lucky to have with us the great George Will, Pulitzer Prize-winning columnist for The Washington Post, senior political contributor here at Newsnation, and author of more than 20 books and plenty of cultural history among that. Yoni, I want to read you to you. I want to share this excerpt from your book. Today, the problem I'm describing is generally referred to as our affordable housing crisis, but that's not quite right. What we actually face is a mobility crisis. The distinction matters. Americans used to be able to choose where to live, but now moving toward opportunity. Moving toward opportunity is now largely a privilege of the economic elite. Great book. I really enjoyed it. And it destroyed a theory that I had, which is that transient communities have less cohesiveness. And you point out that churn is actually what makes communities sticky. Please explain.
Yeah, it's a little counterintuitive. But one of the great gifts that America gave the world was that we allowed people to move where they wanted to live. And as they did that, they cast loose from the identities that they inherited and were able to construct new identities. When we say that America is an individualistic nation, we're not an atomized nation. We're not totally cut off from each other. American individualism is expressed by means of the communities that we choose to join and affiliate ourselves with. And those communities are sustained in large measure by a steady inflow of new arrivals who bring with them new experiences and new skills and enliven the communities.
And they want to fit in. They want to get in to fit in where they show up, right? So they're the ones who join the civic organizations and the churches and do the stuff because they're looking to plug in.
That's exactly it. You arrive in a new town, you don't know anyone. Maybe you go to church for the first time in years on Sunday because you're looking to meet your neighbors and find a community. Maybe you join the bowling league. Whatever it is, you're going to find a way to do that awkward thing, which is to reach out and make connection. And moving was often the impetus for Americans to do that.
George, Yoni's book joins Abundance, which is, and Mark Dunkelman's Why Nothing Works, in challenging the left and presenting a new path forward. You wrote about abundance in your always excellent column. Progressivism explains much of what abundance deplores. The opposite of abundance is scarcity, in which progressives see opportunity. They mistakenly think that societies justify rationing, hence detailed government supervision of society, hence the administrative state. It is, whatever it is, it must be good for you as a conservative, as the foremost conservative, to see people embracing the idea of abundance.
Spontaneous order, Hayek concept, the idea that urban planning should be a self-refuting phrase. You don't plan the great creativity of a dense coming together of people, which is why we go to cities in the first place. When Oklahoma was hit by the 1-2 punch of the Dust Bowl and the Depression, the Joad family didn't go down to the city hall and look for their benefits. They piled everything they owned, and they could pile everything they owned, onto a jalopy, and they went to Southern California, arriving about in time for the aerospace in the Second World War. People moved, and that's a terrible thing when Americans stop moving around.
And Yoni, now when they get to Southern California, they find that there's no permitted housing. I was thinking about your book when I heard the news that after the terrible fires in Southern California, 60,000 homes or whatever were burned, and only 4 permits have been authorized for new homes to be constructed. Your book told me that in the 19th century, 1 in 3 Americans moved every year. In the 1960s, it was 1 in 5, 20% of Americans moved, and in 2023, it was 1 in 13. Talk about Moving Day. This was an American holiday, the 1st of May, that I did not even know existed, and I've written history books and I've done all this stuff. Talk about the phenomenon of the very mobile America.
Yeah, when Americans gained this freedom to live where they wanted, to join their communities instead of allowing the communities to select their own members. They took to the road with sort of wild abandon. In cities, all of the leases would expire on the same day, and Americans would pick up and swap residences. A quarter, third, half of the residents of a single city would change their address between sunup and sundown, and almost all of them ended up someplace better than they had been living, right? The rich moved into the brand new housing. the housing they vacated, the upper middle class moved into, and so on down the line. You can trace 10, 12 moves in a row as one vacated apartment was filled by another family. And that was because we were adding housing. We hadn't so tied ourselves down with rules and regulations that you couldn't add enough housing to the market. And as long as you're setting out more chairs in the circle, you can play that game of musical chairs every May 1st. You can take all of your worldly belongings, pile them on the curb, put them in a cart, take them across town, and move into a new apartment as the other family is moving out and end up someplace better. You get that seat that opened up for you because we were adding the kind of supply that Americans required.
You likened it to a lobster that outgrows its shell. It has to molt its shell. As it grows, it's got to molt its shell and get into a bigger shell. So our lobsters kept getting bigger. The communitarian component of this, of a mobile, in the book, Yoni talks about his family story. It got me thinking about the Stirewalts and where they had been all over the country and how moving the mobility of Americans. What about the argument, though, that we're sort of past our adolescence as a country now, and maybe we don't molt anymore, and maybe that we have entered sort of the European phase of Americanness, and we're not going to be transitory people anymore.
But what, 14% of us in the country were not born here? Mm-hmm. As long as we keep having immigration, and long may it flourish in my view, we're going to be a restless people. Immigration is an entrepreneurial act. You uproot yourself and take a risk. And as long as that is part of the DNA of the country, we don't need to worry about stagnation.
You talk about the political implications, of course, which I immediately dove into because of how my weird brain works. You said something really interesting. The states where people say they welcome immigrants and want new and say that, you know, in this house we welcome people, no person is illegal, so on and so forth, tend to be in places where they have really tight restrictions on new housing. But if you go to the red states, that's where in the South and in the Southwest, the places are more wide open for building new, and they are in fact more hospitable to new residents of all kinds. What occurred to me is the North will continue to get more Republican. The old places will continue to get more Republican as youth and vitality moves to those new places, those places in the South and West, and they'll get more Democratic. Is that a crazy premise on my part?
No, it's not crazy. It could happen. Right now, when you look at it, there's a great study which shows it's not just blue states versus red states, it's how progressive a jurisdiction is.
Okay.
For every 10 points more liberal jurisdiction votes, its new housing permits drop by 30%. So it's the most progressive places in the country that are walling themselves off from new arrivals. Yeah, as young people move away, we may see a shift. The interesting thing about that, though, is that there's nothing written in stone that says that young people have to be more Democratic than Republican. We are seeing a shift among younger voters, and some of that comes from a shift in the population. People tend to absorb the views of the communities in which they reside, and as the population shifts toward red states, we're seeing a redrawing of the political map.
What's your, and by the way, thanks for a deep tease. We're going to talk about that later in the show. If in terms of people in their community as they're thinking about this stuff, what's the simple answer? What do you offer communities that they could do to make it more possible for these lobsters to keep molting?
Yeah, you've got to regard your community as a living thing, and living things need to grow. They need to change over time. So you've got to open yourself to the possibility of having new neighbors, of new children arriving in your child's school. You've got to change the zoning and building regulations so that people can build. And if you allow people to build, they will come. They will move into your community. They will find the opportunities that they're seeking for themselves and for their families.
Mr. Will, I take it zoning. Are you a no zoning kind of guy?
Pretty much.
Pretty much. Let it happen and let communities figure it out.
Yeah, either let communities figure it out, or someone comes along and say, "I've already figured it out," and I distrust people like that. the people are leaving California, and where are they going?
Yeah.
To Texas. What's the biggest city in Texas? Houston. They have any zoning in Houston yet? I don't think so. And people have been saying, yeah, well, all these people are now going to Florida. Florida is going to get more Democratic. Hadn't happened.
Hasn't happened yet.
The reverse has happened.
Because and that's a problem for these communities, because we saw it in Detroit. Detroit lost 1 million people in population from 2000 to 2010. Some of those were people who passed away, but a lot of those are young people with portable skills who can go, right? The people that you lose when you can't accommodate growth are the people who you need in your community, right?
And the city looks moth-eaten now. It's got empty blocks and houses that sort of stick up like a single tooth in an old mouth. And by losing its young people, it has lost its grip on the future. Detroit is coming back. It's making efforts now to open itself up for business, to attract new families. And I think cities can revive themselves, but they've got to be open to change.
Okay, these smart gentlemen have, against probably the advice of their loved ones, agreed to stay with us for this show because they're going to help us out as we go through. So we are very grateful to you.